Hello, hello, welcome everyone. I am Ana Flores. I'm checking that my mic is actually not muted. I am Ana Flores and I am the founder and CEO of We All Grow Latina. And I'm here with a heart full of gratitude to be able to welcome you all to our very first Poderosas at Any Age community conversations sponsored by AARP. During this virtual event series, we are welcoming some of the Latinas más poderosas out there whose fearlessness and determination helped them achieve beyond their wildest dreams. These women overcame those telling them that you're either too young or you're too old to do that. A ver, have you heard any or actually said any of these phrases? Te dejó el tren? The train has left your station. Ya estoy muy vieja para eso. I'm too old for that. Or a mi edad, eso no se ve bien. At my age, that doesn't look good. I know I have. I'm guilty of it. And I'm checking myself because words are powerful. Ageism is a concept that is often misunderstood and carries so many taboos, especially within the Latinx community. We honor beauty, we honor success, we honor rites of passage, but we do so within a traditional expectation and constraint of age. You're either too young or too old to achieve certain milestones of success. So, for the next 3 weeks, thanks to our sponsor AARP's Disrupt Aging, we're going deep to dismantle ageism porque at my age yo puedo todo. AARP has supported the We All Grow Latina community for a few years now, from sponsoring our Ceremonia Welcome Party at We All Grow Summit 2019 to providing resources, mentorship, and grants to small business owners at the height of the pandemic by sponsoring our Latina Mentors campaign last year. Disrupt Aging is a bold approach to changing how we think about aging by challenging outdated beliefs and sparkling new solutions to empower people to choose how they live as they age. Each person, cada persona, cada una de ustedes can experience ageism differently. Our age, gender, culture can all play a role, which is one of the reasons that conversations like today's are so important. We need to be able to understand what ageism looks like in its various forms in order to be able to address it. So it's time to change the conversation, and we're starting right here, right now. Continue the conversation in social media via the hashtags at @myAgeYoPuedo. Tell us what you are doing, qué es lo que tú puedes, and #disrupt aging, and tell us how you're defining ageism. Our host, ay, qué gusto presentarla. Our host for these powerful conversations is my dear friend Mariana Atencio. Mariana is an award-winning journalist, a best-selling author, and a viral speaker. As the co-founder of Go Like, a multimedia production company, she knows what it takes to launch a business and be told you're too young. This Venezolana has a TEDx talk on authenticity, what makes you special. You must watch it. It is one of the top 10 most watched TEDx talks on YouTube. I don't know, it's like 18 million views right now. Her book, Perfectly You, was an Amazon bestseller. She's also a former national TV host for NBC and Univision, and she has been the only Latina in many rooms and is always fighting to give our community a seat at the table. Mariana, welcome. Join me, please, in welcoming Mariana. Mariana, hola, querida. The stage is yours.
Hola, Ana, ¿cómo estás? Thank you
Hi.
so much for that introduction. Such a pleasure to be here with all of you, with our We All Grow comunidad. You know, when Ana reached out about hosting this event, well, first, she's the kind of leader that you always say yes to. And secondly, I could relate to this issue at hand so much. You know, I've been judged for my age on TV and in publishing and in business, as I'm sure you have. So I've been reading where everybody is joining in from, and I can't wait to dive in. But as we are all super hard Latinas on here, hardworking and super busy, I want us to take a minute to sort of get into the frequency of this sacred space that we're creating together so that you can really soak in this information and this growth. To get in the zone, we're going to do one of my tested rituals, which I do with my motivational attendees all over the world, our breathing technique. So wherever you're watching this from, if you're maybe grabbing a cafecito, I want everybody to sit down. Just take a beat, sit down, place your phone, your laptop, your computer, and close your eyes. Start taking deep breaths through the nose, out the mouth. Breathing reduces stress levels in your body, lowers your heart rate, your blood pressure. Now, here's how to unlock your poderosa self. As you breathe in, I want you to think about everything you want in your life. Breathe in self-love, breathe in self-confidence, breathe in success. And as you breathe out everything you want to be rid of. Breathe out insecurities, self-doubt, impatience. Let's do it one more time together. Breathe in beauty, health, abundance, power. Breathe out negative opinions, desperation, frustration. And now open your eyes. I see you, te veo. I recognize the best in you and what is sacred in everything that surrounds us, especially this community that we are building today. So as you're going about your day, anything you want to attract, breathe in. Anything you want to be rid of, breathe out. Now we're going to divide our conversation in two parts. And I'm going to ask you a question in between each one. And I want to be reading all of your answers. Las quiero leer a todas. Las quiero participando. Because today we're going to tackle one, how perseverance shows up when you're la primera on many fronts. Two, how to foster a builder mentality at any age. And three, Latinas in STEM, because we need more of it. And our guest for this first conversation is none other than la poderosa Natalie Molina Niño. Aplauso. Woo! Natalie is a builder capitalist, author, educator, and former global tech entrepreneur. In 2019, she co-founded the trade organization for builder capitalism, an alternative asset class to venture capital, was honored with Schweppes inaugural Women of Wall Street Awards for her influence in banking and finance, and was named among People Magazine's 2019 Most Powerful Latinas. In 2018, her book, Leapfrog, The New Revolution for Women Entrepreneurs, was named one of Book Authority's best CEO books of all time. Natalie is no doubt what we call La Jefa, and she's going to share all of her wisdom with us today. Bienvenida, Natalie.
Gracias. How do you clap and make it sound like it's 20 people, Mariana? Is it just your energy, or do you have a little side effect happening next to you? What's happening?
It is my energy, but I kind of operate like one of those old-fashioned sitcoms where I have the cue the applause.
I feel like we all need that, obviously, in a lot of contexts.
So Natalie, let's dive into this issue because I know everybody's time is very valuable and we want to soak in everything that you have to share. From what I just even mentioned about your life journey, I mean, you have been the first in so many spaces. And actually, as Shonda Rhimes says, you know, first, only different. Many of us are often the first in our family to accomplish something with no blueprint, and the only in many rooms, as Anna mentioned. How have you navigated this, and how has perseverance shown up in your life to help you, regardless of what other people think?
I think that the first part of your question, in terms of how are you, I don't know, able to be the first, is I didn't think about it, or I don't think I was aware of it in any context, right? I mean, I think that maybe we feel that subtle pressure, especially if you're the first in the family, to do something, right? But I think on the other hand, there's a little bit of ignorance is bliss, right? Like, why put sort of needless pressure on yourself when your heart is telling you to do something and you do it? And I think that that's probably a helpful thing. At least for me, it has very much been about not focusing on that and really focusing on what's driving me. And then listen, the other part of your question, we may as well start with the first question and have some real talk, right? And the truth is that if you need courage to be the first, if you have to persevere through adversity, as I think that we all have to at some point in our lives, I think that sometimes the difficulty and maybe even sometimes the tragedy of some of the sacrifices that we have to make, they make us stronger, right? And I think that one thing that we don't talk about enough is, especially among Latino families, like, our families want the best for us, right? There is the unity within the family that is so unique to our culture and that I think makes us special and strong. But it's also difficult when you are living in another culture that says, you know what, the best colleges might not be in the city that you live in. And so as much as your family wants to succeed, your family also doesn't want you to move, a 6-hour flight away to go to college. I have heard stories after stories, especially with young Latinas who say, my family wasn't supportive of me flying away far to go to college. My family wasn't necessarily on board with some of the decisions that I made. As much as they wanted the best for me, I was pushing the envelope of both what was possible, what was acceptable, and what we were comfortable and familiar with, right? And it's tough. It's tough because you make those decisions, in your heart of hearts that this is the best thing for you, but sometimes you have to do it in conflict to what your family wants you to do, right? And then it becomes the question of, are you too good for us? Why are you going against the wishes of your abuelita, of your mom, of your, that's a really uniquely, I think, Latina, and I know that there are other cultures that also experience this, but it is so common among Latinas that I think that, we have to acknowledge that that is difficult. It can be traumatizing, as somebody just mentioned in the comments. It can feel like a loss, right? It can feel, I think that my relationship intimately here with my family, for example, in Los Angeles, is probably different today than it would have been if I had stayed here and lived my whole life here within the, 50 miles that I grew up. And we have to acknowledge that.
Just to jump in there, I think that, well, first of all, what you're saying just resonated with me so much. Since we are having a conversation about also how age influences everything, the naysayers almost never go away, right? Because in the beginning it can be your abuelita, but then it can be your partner or maybe your husband who's like, oh, I don't want you to make the leap, etc. So that's just going to keep coming up. How do we keep persevering?
Yeah, I mean, we exercise it as a muscle, right? And that's kind of why I think, you can let that trauma or what feels like a loss that I think so many of us have to experience early on to break away, right? When you're bicultural, when you're bilingual, when all of these things happen. Or you can actually use it as a way to develop that superpower, right? Develop that muscle of knowing that there are always going to be voices that are sort of going against what you know in your heart of hearts is what you need to do. And you just develop the muscle for pressing on, right? And having those moments, I love the exercise that you did, Mariana, right? Having those moments, however you do it, to ground yourself in what feels good for you, right? And at the end of the day, look, so many of us are playing the long game, and that's sometimes where the culture comes from, right? Where, I always tell, and in my book, I tell the story of Nelly Galan, who's a good friend, right? Who left at totally against the wishes of her family to college, and then later to a job across the country. But there is nothing like the long game of telling that story and reminding yourself that you can do this too, where she remembers later in life buying that beautiful apartment for her parents in Miami, right? And saying, if I hadn't left, if I hadn't made the decisions that you guys were so against, this would not be happening. And at the end of the day, proving to yourself and your family and all the people that you care about that you're playing the long game, you'll be back. At the end of the day, my decisions are in line with what we were all raised to do, which is to be good members of our family in our own way. That long game, I think, is the thing that gets me through the hard times as well. Like, even if they don't agree, I know where I'm going, right?
I love that. And that's our first big takeaway, is playing the long game, almost like looking back at where you're starting, seeing what you are now to move you where you want to go. And the long game also applies to those naysayers or those people who may not believe in what you're doing, who are managers, who are colleagues. The system that sometimes seems set up against us, we have to continue to practice perseverance as a muscle. So on to my second question. What was that first time that you felt, I have to do this? What I call the whisper in your ear. We know that the space that you navigate is a space where not many women are represented, not many Latinas are represented.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm obviously a masochist. I started in tech and then I went to finance. The only place that's worse than tech when it comes to women and Latinas, right? I mean, but my calling, and I guess maybe this is the thing that I hope that people take away as well, is my calling wasn't, let me go start a tech startup. My calling wasn't, even now, let me go and do something interesting in finance. My calling, in my case, as a little girl, was justice. It always has been. And if I had been a better artist, maybe I would have been writing about justice and doing things in that creative space, right? As an author exclusively. Maybe if I was, better at other things, I would be doing those other careers, but it doesn't matter sort of the way that I chose or the medium that I chose. What matters for me is if I had a calling, it was justice, right? As a little kid, I remember, anybody who knows me knows I'm a vegetarian. But not everybody knows that I've been a vegetarian since I was a child. And in a South American family, that's weird. I mean, let's be real, right? I mean, the first question my family asked when I said I was a vegetarian at age 10, I think, was, ¿Quién te enseñó esa palabra? Like, who taught you that word, right? And it was because I was little and people told me, be kind to the dog, be gentle with the parrot, be gentle and kind to animals because that's what it means to be a good person. And then they would feed me one at the table and I didn't understand. So for me, even as a little kid, there was the sense of like, what is correct? What is just? What is kindness? And I think that if you see a through line in my strange, circuitous career that very few people understand, it's that, right? And so that's the calling. And I think that you are not your job. Your calling is what you want to do in the world, and how that manifests, it's up to you, right? And it changes throughout your life. And if you have a circuitous career like mine, this is how you make sense of it.
Oh, takeaway number 2, your calling is not what you do. It is what you've always believed that you can do. And the path may be changing. It may be a winding road. Since we are talking about age, for some people, that calling, or really listening to that whisper in their ear and asking themselves, what is it that I wanted to do as a child? What is it that really motivates me, that lights me up inside? That can come at any age, right? So for many of the women on here who are watching, how do you lean into the whisper, maybe, further on in your life and really develop the courage to make that pivot?
Look, at the end of the day, I think what has to be prioritized is what you are prioritizing in yourself that you want to develop. So I'll give you a perfect example, right? I was what others might consider was like the top of my career when I left tech and decided I was done, right? Partly it was because I didn't do a good job taking care of my health, and I needed some time off, but it was also partly I was ready to do something radically different. And what people would have thought, what the standard sort of, career advisor or coach might have taught you is take whatever your superpowers are. And if you're going to take a couple years off, or if you're going to do a pivot, focus on the areas where you're going to be focusing on the things that are most beneficial to your career, right? So a perfect example is that I was never a fan of finance. It was never my strength. I was good at other things. And so maybe I would have spent a couple of years, or my pivot would have been, let's learn about finance. And look, I'm in finance now. It would have been very useful for me to do that. But instead, I looked at what is valuable to me personally, not necessarily my career. What is going to make me a more complete human being? What is going to make me build on the strengths that I've already seen capitalize? And for me, it was storytelling. So after my career in tech, I went to Columbia and I studied playwriting with theater people, right? Nobody understood why I did that. And yet, if I look back now, and if we are in a competitive situation and we're talking to a founder, and the founder is struggling with their marketing and the story of who they are as a company, they're always going to favor working with me because it turns out I'm really good at that, right? Like, I'm not the best finance person in the world, but the thing that I think that few people can compete with me on is I can sell, because selling is about storytelling, and I can make sense out of things that don't make sense in a way that everybody can understand. And that's not, again, the traditional career path, but I made the choice based on what makes me happy and where I wanted to develop. And I think that when you pivot, it's got to be based on that, right? What's good for you, not necessarily what's good for your resume.
I love that, because I did exactly the same thing when I made the pivot from traditional broadcast news to co-founding my own company. It was what lit me up inside. It was investing in me. So that's takeaway number 3, ladies, is invest in you. What Natalie said, what's going to make you a more whole human being. Now, you just said it. You are a breaker of chains in tech and finance. First of her name, Natalie, you're a builder at heart. And it's incredible to see everything you've been able to build from the ground up. But in our society, like what Ana said, there's a belief that if you're too young, you lack experience. If you're too old, está fuera, out of touch. Does age impact the ability to lead and build the things that you feel called to do?
Yes, of course it does. And it's up to you to decide if that impact is positive, is negative, It's up to you to decide if that impact is helpful or detrimental. So yes, absolutely. I'm not going to pretend that age doesn't matter, because I think that it does. I think that in every room that you come with a collection of your experiences, and that is valuable. So if you have a lot of experiences, that's valuable. If you don't have a lot of experiences, well, guess what? The thing that's valuable is that you're looking at problems with fresh eyes. And I think that what we need to do is acknowledge where we bring value to the table, right? Age, if you look at it the right way, can always bring value to the table. And if there are gaps, because there are always gaps, we don't know everything, we cannot in isolation do everything, right? We will always have gaps. Then we learn how to complement. We learn, if I lack experience in this, then let me bring and find a partner who does that, or let me work with somebody who brings the thing that I don't bring to the table. So yes, age absolutely makes an impact, but I think it's totally up to you whether that's a positive or a negative.
Wow, that you so responded in a way that I wasn't expecting, and I love you even more for it. Yes, it does impact, and it all depends on you. And now we want to hear from you, everyone that is tuning into this conversation. It is our first poll question, and as I said, I want everybody participating. So we're going to have the We All Grow team put in those poll questions, and the question is the following: have you ever experienced someone telling you, you're too young or too old to do something? Is that a yes or a no? And have you proven them wrong? Okay, I'm actually going to play this with you. No or yes. For me, it's yes on the two fronts. People have often told me, you're too young to cover political conventions, Mariana. You're too young to co-found your own business. You're too young to write your own book. And guess what? Here's my proof. I proved them wrong. I wrote my book. Okay, 82% of people who've responded have said that, yes, they have been told you are too young, too old to do something, and they have proven them wrong. That's 83%. 15% or so, no. So overwhelmingly, yes, at this point. We're going to give it just a couple more seconds for the final results. So listen, almost, yes, here we go. 80% of people tuning in right now have been told you are too young, que si eres muy joven o eres muy vieja o viejo para hacer algo, y han demostrado lo contrario. Natalie, on to the 80% of people who said yes. What would be the best advice you could give to anyone who feels or who has been told you are too young or too old to do something? Where do we go from there?
So I'm going to run down some numbers, right? And the ones that I'm obviously the most familiar with are entrepreneurial numbers, right? And I'm not arming you with these numbers with the rosy, optimistic belief that you can show up to one of these, moments in your life and be like, but the stats say this, because I know that if someone believes something, that even if it's factually incorrect, like, you're going to have a hard time convincing them otherwise. But it's more about how you frame it, right? Perfect example is that in Silicon Valley, there isn't an ageism problem on the young side, right? Youth is lionized. People are giving ridiculous amounts of money for people that are, to people that are, in their early 20s. There's story after story of examples of this. In Silicon Valley, on the youth side, what they have a problem with is racism. And we can talk about that another day in another call. But what they do have in, for example, Silicon Valley is a problem with age. I mean, over 30 years old, and people start wondering whether you're relevant and whether you're okay in the position that you're in. I mean, there is an absolute obsession with youth. And what's interesting about that is that every statistic indicates that actually people, and especially women over the age of 50, are 2 times as likely to be successful at business than everyone else. And so if it were true that Silicon Valley, for example, cared about making money, maximizing returns, all of the things that they claim to care about, then Silicon Valley would be drowning in women over the age of 50, because every actuarial data says that that's the case. And so the reason that I think that that's a perfect example is that it shows you that people are not making rational decisions based on real information, right? And so that is the thing that needs to fuel any pivot that anyone is doing, right? It doesn't matter what the culture is telling you is right, too old, too young, whatever. You can both come up with stats and examples of people who did it differently. And even if they're not in your industry, even if they're not exactly in the situation that you're in, you might be the next example that the next generation uses to show what's possible when everybody else said it wasn't, right?
I can't believe that stat that you gave. I'm gonna look up that, and I'm just gonna have it handy. My business partner at Go Like, she's over the age of 50, and her drive, her creativity, just her well of experience is, I know that I am 10 times more poderosa because she is a part of this endeavor. But still, I know that even news is a place that also, it puts women in an impossible position, because if you are too young, then you're too young to conduct interviews with heavy hitters or to be, running the political desk. But then if you are over an age where they feel that you're fresh to go on television, then you're also going to be judged based on that. So my question to you is, in your experience, are women judged more harshly because of their age in tech and finance than men, or is it sort of equal? My doorbell, just apologies for that.
That's okay. That's life. We're lucky my dogs aren't barking in the background. Look, women are judged more harshly in every possible category, in every possible industry, in every country on this planet, in every society, and in every culture. And so I think it's important for us to not dismiss that. So for example, people will talk about how in politics, men will lose 2-3 elections before they finally win something, right? Women run for something and then they tend to not run again. And people think that it's because women quit. No, it's because the women are told that their career is over after they lose that first political campaign. It's because the criticism to that woman who ran for that political office was exponentially harder and potentially exponentially more damaging to her, to her family, to so many people, that if you care about your own mental health, if you care about even the safety of your family, right, then you're going to pull a Naomi Osaka and you're going to say, you know what? I'm going to protect my mental health, and maybe I'm not going to run again. And so the onus is not necessarily on us to take the harder punches and to take the far, far deeper scrutiny and move on. The onus is on the people around us to get out of our way, right? You cannot make it 10 times harder for women and then wonder why they show up 1/10 of the time. Right? That dynamic is what needs to change. And that's what we need to demand. The same way that I think that we have that inspiration from this professional tennis player, right? She is in a position to say, I demand that I be treated differently, and she's acting like it. And we all need to do that.
Bueno, somebody opened the door and look at what I got.
¿Qué?
I mean, this has to be from Ana Flores over at We All Grow. Ana, gracias. Or this is actually a product of the conversations that we're having today. Already.
Yes.
Space on your gracias misma.
We demand, like Mariana, that everybody gets us the flowers when our flowers are due.
Listen, that's all the good energy that I'm getting from this community, because I mean, everything that you're saying, Natalie, just resonates so much. And now I come to the pun intended age-old question of, when women are put in those impossible situations, like, we sometimes are the first ones to be just so harsh on one another, right? I heard so many women in the past week and a half be harsh against Naomi Osaka for the decision that she made, or I've heard women be just, so tough on other ones in all of these spaces. How can we band together? How can we just be more gentle with each other and understanding? And how can we start here at We All Grow?
One of the things that I think about when people ask me, especially around like the next generation of women, for example, that are maybe coming into tech or finance in my areas, is sort of what sort of advice would I give them? And I think that ties into your question, Mariana, which is the answer is one and the same in terms of what can we do? How can we be more gentle? How can we sort of, show over the world with the power that we already have, right? And I think that it is, to me, what I already see the next generation doing, which is Silicon Valley worse than when I was starting in the industry? Is the entertainment world, prior to Me Too, was it better? It is not the case that things have changed. What has changed is our patience to put up with it, right? What has changed is that the next generation of women realize what I think many of us in my generation and generations before me did not realize, which is that they realized that they were not suffering alone. They realized that they were not in a silo, that there were other women who were experiencing the same thing. And you can ignore one voice of protest. You can ignore one person going to HR and complaining because they're experiencing abuse of some kind. You can ignore one founder saying that the venture capitalists didn't treat them well. But you cannot ignore a cacophony of voices. You cannot ignore hundreds and thousands of voices coming together. And so my hope is that we can be more gentle with each other, because we realize that the only way that we can truly mobilize and have power is by doing it together, right? There is power in numbers. And I have to say, I feel silly saying this is my recommendation for women today, because I feel like the next generations are actually teaching us what we should have done a long time ago to make life easier for them.
Oh, takeaway number 4, if there's something that we can get you to do after this gathering today, is go out and support another woman, is go out and tell her you are not alone in this. We're all in this together. I love that, Natalie. And now you're a part of our tribe and our team. So thank you for that. For you, Latinas in STEM and STEM education, it's crucial and something very close to your heart. What can these startups do, tech institutions and workplaces do to promote age-related equity?
It's interesting because I think that with respect to age, again, in tech, as I mentioned before, we lionize youth, right? Until it's Black or brown. Then suddenly we have an issue. So I do think we have, a mixture and sort of, an overlap of sort of issues here. And I think that makes it uniquely challenging for Latinas, right? And I think that what we need to do, oftentimes in an environment where we are not necessarily the ones holding the power, because the majority, for example, of investors in tech, the majority of the mentors who have sort of been there and done that, right? They don't look like me, right? And I mentor as many people as I can, but there are only 365 days in the year, and that's part of what the book was for. It was like, how do I multiply myself? I don't know how to do it physically, so let's put, a little bit of wisdom into a book. But I think that one of the things that we have to do is we have to demand more and more people in our ecosystem look like us. And so, for example, an interesting, powerful thing that a bunch of founders did, I think it was a year, maybe 2 years ago now, is a bunch of founders who you would think would not be in the most position of power, right? Because they're not the investor. They got together and they said, we will not take money from venture capitalists who have no diversity on their teams. If you are an all-white venture capital team, you will not be investing in my startup or the startup of any of my peers. And a bunch of founders got together. And again, power in numbers said, this is what we demand, right? Even though they weren't in the position of the most power. And so I think that more things like that, demand to see the people around you and the world around you, demand that it looks and interacts with you the way that you want to see the world. And the more of you start to demand that, people complain, right? People can complain about how millennials are difficult to work with, or they make too many demands, or they don't stay and work, 80-hour weeks the way that people in previous generations do. And I look at those complaints and I just laugh. I think, yeah, and they're teaching us. They're teaching us how to be more healthy. And they're teaching us by coming together in numbers and showing us, who are perhaps in positions of more power and support, how they demand to be treated. And I love it.
And I would take, what you said even further, when those diversity numbers are met, because we're definitely witnessing a wave, it is, how do you not stifle those new voices and morph them into existing ones, but let them just be their most authentic selves? What's the point? I always saw it in news. What's the point of hiring diverse talent if everybody's going to talk the same, look the same, cover the same stories, right? It defeats the purpose. So once, for everybody listening on here, once you make it into these spaces, choose authenticity. That's also a muscle that you have to, harden every day. Choose authenticity every day when you walk into the office, into a Zoom meeting, because you are creating space for others that will come after you.
Absolutely.
Well, a big question that I had for you, Natalie. Have you ever made any mistakes? I don't know what you have, but if you have made any mistakes that we can learn from, I would love to hear about maybe one or two that stick out for you.
Thank you for giving me a limit, because we can have a very long conversation on how many mistakes I made. Look, I think, there's some that people have heard who follow me, like they're in my book, like I've talked about those, so I won't repeat that. But I do think that one of the things that is probably among my biggest mistakes is that in my effort to be a good founder, in my effort to be a good leader, right? I had this philosophy that I will not demand of my team, for example, anything that I wouldn't do myself. So if people have to stay until 10 o'clock in the evening, then I'm staying until 10:30, right? There was this sense of like, I'm going to lead by example. I'm going to be in the trenches with everybody. But here's the problem with that. I taught everyone around me to be as unkind to their bodies as I was being to mine. And I found myself 14, 15 years into a career with a full body meltdown and adrenal failure. And if somebody doesn't know what adrenal failure is, Google it. It basically is the result of years upon years of stress and overworking to the point where your immune system starts to shut down. And that's only one way that you can do damage to your body. Of course, your body tells you and communicates with you in many ways. That's how my body chose to communicate with me. But here I thought I was being a leader. I was doing, camaraderie with my team. I was sort of showing by example what it meant to be ambitious and to be driven and to support everyone around me. But all I was doing is being as unkind to them as I was being to myself. And I think that that is an interesting mistake that I don't want to pretend that I learned it. I woke up one day, I learned it, and then boom, I magically addressed it. I think for me, it's the shadow side. And I think that that's the interesting thing about mistakes is we tend to make the same mistake in different flavors throughout our entire lives. So that mistake isn't just something from when I was younger and it's over. It's the shadow side. It's always there. If I find myself reverting to something, it's going to look like that, some variation of that. And so it's a mistake that I think that I'm constantly aware of and I'm constantly trying to avoid.
Because people don't change. It's just a question of how can we learn. I also love in that respect the team that I've built, and I always say it, nobody gets far alone. We see it with the We All Grow team. Right. A tremendous example of that. And I ask my team members to keep me in check, right? Nobody knows me better than my co-founder, and she's like, Mariana, I see you falling into this pattern again. So it just helps me not revert back to those old ways. But thank you for sharing that. I see you're very healthy and happy now, hopefully.
Yeah.
But thank you for that wisdom. Would you say, as you were embarking on your journey, many of us, and this has happened to me in media a ton, that many of us find ourselves stuck, right? Nos sentimos estancadas, nothing's flowing, the opportunities aren't coming about, or maybe you're at a job that you're like, wow, so this is not what I want for me at this age. Mm-hmm. And you don't really see the light as to how can you really make it a turning point to where you want to go. So what was that turning point, that key factor in your journey to success where you said, yes, this was something that truly made a change to put me on the path of success that I envisioned for myself?
I love the question. And by the way, I know that, you had in mind sort of what we were going to be talking about, but you've switched it up and you've moved it around. And I love what you've done, because here's the thing. The answer to this question kind of builds on what we were just talking about, right? So there is a culture right now, which I call hustle porn, and a lot of people call hustle porn. It's the idea that if you're just the first one in the office and the last one in, and if you just work harder than everybody else, that will be the key to your success. Except what the truth of the matter is that in a lot of rooms and a lot of industries, and you know this, Mariana, because this is very much true in the industries that you've touched, the big boy deals are made at the golf course. There is a point at which working longer hours and harder than everyone else, I'm not saying that doesn't work and it doesn't have sort of a place and a time, because sometimes, especially early on when you're building your career, there's something to be said about just working really hard and putting in your hours and putting in your time. But there is a point in everyone's career and in everyone's industry where you really have to work smart versus hard. And to your question, this last one of what do you do when you're stuck, right? It turns out that working smart and not hard, deciding to go on that trip with your friends when you could have been working all weekend, it turns out that's also the way to get unstuck, right? Getting out of your head, not pounding yourself against the desk and thinking the idea is going to come. The idea is going to come if you leave the office and go with your friends to a spa, and in the shower at some point you're going to get that brilliant idea that you weren't able to get in the office. Like, it turns out being good to yourself is also being good to your career, and that's how you sort of get unstuck. And for me, I have to tell you, the way that I got unstuck was when I went to theater school. I was done with tech, and I was done with that sort of traditional business world that I had grown up with. And it was a woman named Catherine Colbert, who became my friend and my mentor and ultimately my co-founder, who said to me, you've got to go back. You don't get to have a 15-year career in tech, and to your point, be the first, the only, and all these things, and then just retire and disappear. And what was really difficult to hear was she sat me down, and we're talking about 10 years ago. She said, think about the industry when you started 15 years ago versus the industry today. Is it better? And the truth is it's not. It's worse. She says, is this how you're going to go out? Are you going to leave that place worse than you found it? Or are you going to get back in the game and be an activist and change it and make sure that by the time you're done with this life, you're leaving that community that you grew up in better than you found it? And it was her basically saying, you don't get to not be an activist. You don't get to just put your head down and do good work. You have to do that and be an activist. And when she sat me down and schooled me and also taught me how to be an activist and taught me that I don't have to choose, I can do whatever I'm doing and be an activist too, that's ultimately for me what changed, right? And I wouldn't have had that experience and I wouldn't have met her if I hadn't gone out of my world and into a world that I didn't know.
All of that wisdom is just work smart, not hard. You know, we're going to talk about activism next Thursday's conversation, so plug into that. But I love what you said about just the golf course. In fact, Mirna started taking golf lessons now. She's over the age of 50 because she's like, Mariana, that's where the deals are being made. So it's about, as you said, going on that trip with your friends where you're going to have this incredible idea. What are the conversations that everyday people are having that your friend, what issues do they care about? It's
Right.
what I call getting into the creative idle state, which you touched on, turning your mind off, turning your cell phone off for a little bit, and really getting back in tune with how do I not fall into this hustle mentality, but how do I work smart? And sometimes it's also, you know, investigate online. Who are the key people that can put you in those positions where you need to be instead of cramming, you know, 6 more hours at the office?
And find your way, because I will confess, anybody who knows me knows I have never golfed a day in my life and I never will. I find my version, right? And I find my way to do it. And
your
people
version
need
was
to feel that.
exactly. In your case, it was theater school. For those who follow me on Instagram, during the last bit of the pandemic, I've also been taking some acting classes, which, you know, I'm doing it on weekends and they just relax me and help me flex another set of muscles that I didn't even know I had. I still have not set foot on the golf course. Maybe we're going to do it together. You and I, Molina, maybe.
Don't hold your breath.
Okay. We're reaching the end of our discussion. So one more question for you before we get into audience participation, which I'm really looking forward to. What advice would you give those Latinas who are on here, who are starting their own business in the tech field, those who are out there facing hurdles at any age, if we had to sort of, you know, give them one big takeaway to end on?
You are the majority. I want to give you a couple stats. Women are starting businesses at twice the rate of men in the United States, despite the fact that you don't see us on the cover of magazines or in TechCrunch or Wired magazine. And so, right, the truth of the matter is women are starting businesses at twice the rate of men. And this is my favorite part. 8.9 out of 10 of those are started by women of color. That's us. We're the majority.
8.9
out of 10 of those women-owned businesses are started by women of color. Even though we don't dominate when you Google woman entrepreneur and we don't dominate in the business media, the fact is we are the majority. So if you feel like you're waiting to be ready to start a business, a project, a new thing within your job, you're waiting to be ready, the day that you feel ready is too late. The whole point of starting things is it's uncomfortable and it feels like you're pushing yourself in a direction that might be too far. If you don't feel uncomfortable, then you've waited too long.
Wow. You blew my mind with that. So you are not alone. We are the majority. Don't wait. Do it now. The whole point is, to make mistakes along the way, as we just learned from you. Natalie, thank you so much. Don't leave us just yet, because I want to ask our audience a question, and then we're going to share some of these amazing takeaways so you can leave here more poderosa than ever. Okay, the We All Grow community is going to prompt a question for you guys with our amazing little tool that we have here. And I want you guys to answer this for me. After this conversation, what are you encouraged to do, or what have you done? At my age, yo puedo que. What have you done? What do you want to do after listening to Natalie today? ¿Dónde están nuestras poderosas? Fill in the blanks, and I would love to call your names and see. Mira esto.
Oh.
It's the first one, fall in love. Oh my God, my heart just flew. Publicar mi libro. I love it.
Take a risk.
Take a risk. This is amazing. At my age, yo puedo. What else? Write a book. I love it. We need your stories out there. At my age, yo puedo empezar mi negocio. At my age, yo puedo cultivate self-love. Keep it coming. Escribir mi libro. ¿Qué más tenemos por aquí?
Viajar donde sea.
Aquí está. Claro que sí. Woo, make millions. Bring in that prosperity. Be a mentor for other women of color. I love that. Is what Natalie talked about. It's legacy. ¿Qué más tenemos por aquí? At my age, yo puedo take a leap. Start with Natalie's book.
Invest in myself.
Mompreneur. I love that you can be a mom and have a successful business as well. At my age, yo puedo comenzar de nuevo. At my age, yo puedo invest in myself. At my age, yo puedo love myself. At my age, yo puedo work smarter. Natalie, let me ask you, what is your at my age, yo puedo? It seems like you have conquered it all, but what's the next frontier?
At my age, yo puedo empezar de nuevo. I'm starting a new company this year. And you know what? People think that by the time you've done it as many times as I've done it, that it just becomes old hat. It's not. I'm just as nervous. I'm just as scared. I'm just as skeptical that maybe it won't work. But, the muscle that helps me ignore those voices is stronger than ever. And that's all I can ask for.
So you put it out there in the universe. We're going to be watching you and cheering on for you every step of the way. And just like we just read all those other messages, the first step, I always tell people, words are so powerful. You wrote it, you put it out there. We all saw it. We're cheering for you. So just declare it every morning when you wake up. At my age, yo puedo. Visualize that dream. Natalie, as we wrap up today, can you share one takeaway, one thing that you learned from today's gathering?
It's both a learning, but it's also like a re-solidification of what I already know. There's a brilliant Afro-Latina named Awilda Verdejo, who is a world-renowned opera singer who now is retired and lives in Seattle, Washington, who once told me, when I have those negative voices in my head, and I see that with all of the comments that people left here, is the mantra that I use every day, which is, you are the source of your own supply, right? The supply is not external. The supply to accomplish whatever you want to accomplish is internal, and you are the source of your own supply. Just feels stronger and louder and more important than ever.
Wow, you are the source of your own supply. That's incredible. And not as profound, but as I just saw this morning from the movie Jerry Maguire, if this is empty, this doesn't matter. Right? We need a heart, and we Latinas, we just have so much passion. That's what we bring to the table. That's our constant supply. We have one audience question from Erika Zambrano. And Erika, I saw that you've been actively participating on this chat. So can we prompt Erika, or maybe we can read her question? Let's see. Erika, que tenía una pregunta por aquí. Oh, here we go. How do you ignore the negative voices and the noise, Natalie?
It's funny because how mantras work, right? Think about the Buddhist mantras, the whole idea of a mantra, right? You almost get to the point where it's like muscle memory. I repeat to myself those words. And by the way, if anyone wants to borrow that, it's yours, or find your own, a beautiful passage from a poem that you love that gives you power, right? But I have actually turned it into my mantra, and it's gotten to the point, and I do want to say this to Erika, I don't not hear the negative voices. If the aspiration is to not hear them, I'm not the person to give you advice because I have never succeeded at removing them. What I have succeeded at doing is making the other voices, like the one that says you are the source of your own supply, louder. And so when those voices come in, my muscle memory kicks in, I start repeating my mantra. And, you know, my goal is simply to make those voices louder than the other ones. And I like that because the world sometimes outside of your own head is also providing negative voices and negative messages. And so the goal, I don't think, is to get rid of them. The goal is to have your voices that you choose to be louder.
And I practice that every single morning as well. Something that you can do, Erica, I wake up, I journal a lot in the first half an hour of the morning. I write down what that mantra is or what the mantra of the day is going to be, those positive voices. I write them down. I have a gratitude jar for those of you who follow me on Instagram. And you're right. You just have to, that positive conversation with yourself has to be longer and more prevalent than the negative conversation.
Another louder.
Another one of the mantras that I practice daily to beat imposter syndrome, because the negative voices are oftentimes imposter syndrome at any age. I always say, you belong to every room you enter. You know, when you enter a room, that feeling of everybody here is older, younger, more experienced, fresher looking, whatever it is that you are telling yourself, just say, I belong to every room I enter. We have one more question from the amazing Alejandra Arce. And this one I can relate to. Let's see. Alejandra, how do you deal with the fact, you know, if English may not be your first language, what do you do in terms of opportunities? Aquí está Alejandra misma. Haz tu pregunta de nuevo. Hola, hola.
Hola, ¿cómo están? You people are so amazing, and this question resonates a lot with me because I don't went to school in America. I went to school in Mexico, so my English has a lot of accent, as you can see. Por eso mi pregunta es, ¿cómo, en términos de oportunidad, cuando inglés no es tu primer idioma, how do you deal with that?
Natalie?
Well, first of all, you did go to school in America because Mexico is part of the Americas, as is South America, as are all of us who are all collectively American. You know, I have 3 American passports, my Colombian one, my Ecuadorian one, and my US one. Look, I think that what's important here is to understand that even the source of your question, right, is coming from a place where I know that you've probably experienced, and we are told constantly that it is somehow a disadvantage, right? And yet, being multilingual is nothing but an advantage, right? The best gift that my family who raised me, I was born and raised in the United States. The best gift that my family gave me was no English in the house. Totalmente 100% español. Por eso lo hablo sin acento. And it's the best gift that my family could have given me. And I think that, you know, we don't encounter this same bias when somebody shows up in an office with a thick French accent, or when somebody shows up in an office with a thick German accent. Nobody thinks, you know what, that European accent is a career limiting, you know, thing. That only seems to happen when we look and sound like we're Latin American. And I think that what's interesting about that is, to go back to fabulous Mariana's mantra, is you belong in every room. And if somebody is going to think of something that makes you smarter, more educated, and honestly, you know, have an asset that most people in the United States don't have, which is a second language, if somebody's going to see something like that as a disadvantage, then maybe that's not the room for you. Or maybe what you know, where you can bring value into that room is part of the education, right? Of showing how much you can bring to the table. So I guess, look, the short answer for me is the root of that question is a problem that is not you, right? You're bringing something of value to the table that most people in the US don't have. And if people are going into rooms with you and not understanding what value that is, then I think that either you change the dynamic of the room to serve you, or you change rooms.
Oh, thank you so much.
Y Alejandra, y la otra cosa, I always say it, accents should be worn as medals, because they showcase that you speak more than one language. It's like, bueno, ¿y tú puedes hacer eso? I don't think so, you know? And briefly, in my case for media, when I tried to hide my accent or the fact that English is not my first language either, era una del montón. When I doubled down on the fact that I was multicultural and bilingual and showcased that in my stories, I became unique on television. So double down on that because that makes you unique. You're beautiful, you're brave, you're powerful y lo hablas súper bien. Así que quítate la pena. Eso es lo primero.
Muchas gracias. The imposter syndrome always came and says you're like, I'm lack of creativity, lack of confidence, because the same reason, because it's like, should I do this thing? Should I speak in front of public? Should I? And it's just the imposter syndrome came to your brain, to your mind. But thank you so much. Aprender de ustedes hoy me empoderó bastante. Gracias.
Gracias a ti. We have one more question to end on. Let's see. Can we bring up, where's the last question? Monica, I believe. Do we have Monica?
And by the way, while Monica comes up, I want everyone to Google an amazing article that came out recently in Harvard Business Review called Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. I love it. The two authors I know, I respect, and there's sort of a new paradigm of like, you know what? Women are judged more, women are criticized more, women pay receipts, for mistakes, higher price. And so I think there's an interesting reframe there. And I learned a lot by reading that article and it really changed the way that I see it. So I would recommend people read that.
We'll look it up. Ya tenemos dos tareas. The new stats on women of color founding new businesses and the imposter syndrome, not necessarily a thing. I'm going to read Monica's question so we can start answering it because I know we're running out of
I
time.
think her mic is on. Sorry.
Let's see. ¿Dónde está Mónica?
Hi. Hola. Hola. So, hi, Natalie. My question is, which has more impact, applying to a company that's trying to change their toxic work relationship culture? Or do we, as women of color, move on to a different company to make a point or protest?
Okay, so I think I'm going to surprise you like I surprised Mariana earlier. There's no right answer, and here's why. We need both, right? If you talk to the most powerful and effective political strategist or strategist in any category, but I happen, right, we just finished 2020, we're all drowning in politics. The most effective strategist in the world will tell you that any good strategy has an outside strategy and an inside strategy, right? And you need both. You cannot change a system exclusively from the outside without having anybody on the inside, and you can't do it the other way around either. So the question is, we're fighting for change, and we need people on both sides. Which one works better for you? Which one feels better? Which one is going to allow you to come home and be happy and do all of the things that you want to do in the world? Some of us are designed for outside. Some of us are designed for outside. A few of us have time in both. And then, maybe we are in that way ambidextrous. You only know, after you try. And so just know that I don't believe that there's a right answer. If you look at my career, you would think that I would always say entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship. But the fact is some of the most successful entrepreneurs have been helped by someone on the inside, somebody at a big corporation that gave them that contract. If that person on the inside hadn't been there, that entrepreneur would never have succeeded. So I really believe that we need both.
Great, thank you.
Of course, thank you for that question.
Before people leave, we have to take our Poderosas class picture. So I'm going to ask everybody to stick around because the We All Grow folks are going to take a community picture of everyone on the Zoom. Let's see, camera on, everybody turn your camera on, very important. Okay, I'm going to actually change the view on here because I also want to take this. This has been just incredible. Wow, no, esta foto está demasiado. Everybody turn your camera on. Let's see. A ver, more cameras on. Okay. Vamos a la cuenta de 5. Okay, I'm still seeing more cameras turning on. Big smiles, funny faces, peace signs, poderosa signs in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Poderosa! Woo! I love it.
I love that you busted out your camera.
Claro, of course. I document everything. Listen, Natalie, I can't thank you enough. Every time that I feel stuck in whatever it is I'm doing, I'm just going to think of you, go back to this conversation, breathe in many of your takeaways, and then just breathe out what I need to get rid of in my life, including imposter syndrome. Today, we have built community. We have empowered one another. We have proven that together we are more. Juntas somos más. So to end, I want everybody to share in one word how you feel after this conversation. Type it in the chat. I want to start reading some of those words. ¿Cómo se sienten? Una palabra después de la conversación de hoy. We have empowered. I'm going to bring out my puppy Blue to read some of these. Clear, poderosa, empoderada, loved, poderosa, fuerte. How do you feel, Blue? Blue feels fluffy after today, reaffirmed, llena, feliz, motivated. I love this. Let's see what else. I feel bendecida, blessed to have met all of you, to have met Natalie, and to have built community today. Agradecida, dice Jennifer.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. Grateful, dice mi amiga Paula. Let's see what else. ¿Cómo te sientes tú, Natalie? One word.
Grateful. Eres una inspiración, Mariana. Gracias.
No, tú eres una inspiración, and really having you break chains in those spaces where you move, I know it's going to open many doors for many Latinas that we need out there. Grateful. That's how we feel with the We All Grow community. I want to invite everyone to join our next conversation. That's happening next Thursday, June 10th, 2021 at My Age Yo Puedo. It's called, listen to this, Climb the World's Highest Peaks, all 7 of them, with Silvia Vasquez Lavado. She's an amazing Peruvian American explorer, mountaineer, social entrepreneur, and technologist. And as we mentioned, the conversation next week is going to explore the intersectionality of identities and age discrimination and the healing power of, Natalie said it, activism, legado. That's how we build community. So thank you, everybody. Gracias, We All Grow. Say bye-bye, Blue. Ciao. Bye-bye, everyone. La quiero mucho. Seguimos adelante. Chao, chao.